It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. How much you can take and keep moving forward.
You want something, go get it. Period.
You gotta keep moving, let's keep moving, let's go. Don't quit till you got nothing left.
This is where we have been, this is how we got here, this is who we are.
Life moves pretty fast. You don't stop and look around once in a while, you could miss it.
You're listening to the Hustle Indy Show, sponsored by FS Houses, where we seek out some of Indy's most hustling people and places to learn about what they do, how they got started, and where they're going. Sit back and enjoy the show.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the second episode of the Hustle Indy Show. I'm joined today by some awesome guests yet again, and we are excited for what we've got today.
Yes, we are. Today is going to be a great one. Well, how was your weekend, Brendan?
Pretty good. I mean, I conveniently decided to go camping on the coldest weekend of the year yet. So
yes, very chilly.
A little cold. It was fun. We did some hiking.
Where'd you go?
We went down to Clifty Falls, which is in Madison, Indiana, or near Madison, Indiana.
I haven't been there.
On the way over to Cincinnati. And yeah, I mean, it was nice during the day. Got some hiking in. Stayed busy. But let me tell you, at night, got down to 40, and I did not bring enough clothes. So
yes, I'm a very warm guy, so I hate the cold.
Yeah.
I hate the cold, absolutely. I went to, have you been to Highland Park?
I have not.
I went to Highland Park for the first time. And anybody that's listening to this from Indy, I highly recommend going there. It was beautiful. The view of the skyline. Yeah, I went at sunset. I got some really, really good drone shots. Highly recommend going there.
So is it on the east side?
Yes, it is just on the east side, really close actually to Fountain Square area. And yeah, it's the skyline, especially at sunset, was beautiful.
Really? I'll have to check that out.
Absolutely.
I like my favorite spot for park-wise is University Park.
That
right downtown by the library.
Yes.
It's got that like symmetrical feel. You can see the skyline. You can see the park.
The big flag.
Yes.
I love that flag. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. This show is again sponsored by FS Houses. They are a local real estate company that can help you with anything from property management, traditional retail sales, investments. So if you are interested in anything about real estate, I highly recommend FS Houses. You can find them on any social media. Their website is fshouses.com, and they have a contact tab there if you're interested in that.
Yeah, very grateful for the sponsor of the show. Thank you to them for allowing us to do this. All right, so our second guest for the show, what we've got today is someone really cool, really special, really creative. He does a lot of stuff. His name is Dan Thompson. He is a drummer, an artist, kind of all the above. So I'd like to welcome Dan Thompson to the show. Welcome, Dan.
What's up, guys?
How you doing today?
Great to have you here. It's nice to be here.
Yeah? You've been staying busy?
Yeah, I mean, I stay busy. The question is always how busy and on what.
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah, staying busy.
What are you rocking with right now?
Right now, I'm working on a piece that's really about voter registration awareness.
Awesome.
Obviously, we're headed into an election that is it's nothing if not a dog and pony show, and not a pretty one. And so it's hard to really underline the importance of voting, but my angle on it is always it's cheap, it's easy.
Yep.
It's in your neighborhood. It's like it's ridiculous. You know, it's 10 times easier than like getting your tags for your car, and it feels way better. So anyway,
for sure,
that's what I'm working on at the moment. But I've got a couple other things going on in the studio.
Awesome. Tell us a little bit about what you do. Like, what do you do in your day to day?
Well, I have a studio, so you guys both know Ryan, obviously. So he and I have a studio. He and I don't have a studio, but he and I work in the same space.
Awesome.
Okay.
In his studio building. There's a couple other guys there. We're one of 3 visual artists. So the other side is all musicians and that whole side. So for me, as a person who plays drums and is just kind of on both sides of the creative brain, it's kind of perfect. So I spend my days there mostly, either working on a piece that I got hanging on the wall, or even if I'm just like doing a digital design or sketchbook work, it's like I've got the table, I got the lights, I've got the, kind of like this, right? You've got your podcast studio. My painting studio is like it's the first time I've had a place big enough to really go, what am I going to do? What am I really going to do in here? So there's that, but the bread and butter for me is really murals, and has been for a long time. So doing big walls, mostly outside, but a lot inside too. So I mean, you've seen my work around the neighborhood already.
Yeah.
And so that's still my bread and butter. But the illustration, canvases, that stuff is becoming it's ramping up, which is good, which is what I want to do,
That's actually really cool. So how did you get started in doing that? Is that something that's been a lifelong project, something more recent, or?
The murals?
Yeah.
Man, yeah. I mean, graffiti, I guess it's like 22 or 23 years at this point that I started doing graffiti, and specifically in that first year of doing graffiti in high school, I did, and the guy that I've done most of my work with, whose name is Ben Long, and we do a lot of graffiti stuff. Fab Crew, we're known around town as Fab Crew. He and I did our first mural, like under a bridge. That that long ago, 22 years ago.
Wow.
And so
That's awesome.
so it's been that the thing with graffiti has always been, the letter pieces and freights and traveling, all that stuff's all that stuff is a critical part of it, but really focusing that energy into how can we take that style of graffiti, how can we take the flavor, the maturity that we express as artists who are practitioners of the culture that take it seriously, but we represent a very small community here. It's like, how do we push that into artwork that at the time was digestible? The fact that we live in a world where street art now is like, there's nothing cooler. Is almost hilarious, because you spend all this time going, how do we make this artwork digestible to people who don't already like the stuff we like? Indianapolis, I feel like, is a market where you're constantly, you can only get so close to the edge. And I don't mean on to the edge. You have to manage your proximity to the edge, because as an artist, the audience is not, I don't want to say they're not open or they're unfriendly, but there are particular tastes. And you can't just go, I mean, we've seen that, right, recently. You can't just go paint whatever you want.
Yeah, there's been some blowback for sure.
For sure. And so, 20 years ago, 15 years ago, this environment we have now didn't exist. The neighborhood, not only Fountain Square, but other areas, Bates Hendricks, Irvington, East 10th Street, all were not quite what they are now.
Sure.
And so to see that work, that's what's fascinating, is growing up in Indianapolis on the east side and watching the way property is turning over, and the way that the artwork that I do, seemingly by coincidence, plays a role in that, or is like benefits from that, and also helps affect that change. So that's been the whole thing as far as murals. But I've only been in like freelance, independent, self-employed artist for about 5 years.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So all that time when I was spending nights and weekends doing the murals, I began my career in toy and game design, like board games, card games.
Really?
Yeah. I've never.
That is fascinating.
Super weird. There was a company based here for a long time. It's not here anymore. It doesn't exist anymore. But they were very successful in card games for that time, and I went in there and I got to do a bunch of weird products that most of which didn't actually make it to market, or ultimately didn't sell through once they hit the shelves, which is a whole other business. And then I entered the digital realm.
Really?
And started working in the advertising world.
What was that like, transitioning from that like physical to the digital?
Right,
Were there challenges in that?
Yeah. I mean, the biggest difference is when you're making toys, games, board game. Even if I'm just making a board game, it's like I have to draw it, I have to put it on cardboard, I have to cut it out. It's like it's a very hands-on process. And once you go into the digital realm, it is. I always say the computer's amazing because it took every tool in the world and made it one that doesn't even feel like a tool. Right? It's like when you sit and work on a computer, you don't feel like you're doing much more than sitting at the computer, and which it's neither good nor bad. I'm not saying that, but for me as a hands-on person who's like, as you see, like I want to, I like to get my hands dirty. Like I'm here to like play and figure it out. The computer was a tough transition because the tool set doesn't give you much inspiration on the face of it.
That's absolutely
what
right.
I mean?
Yeah. Because I know for me, I am very bad artistically using my hands. I'm very bad at drawing. I'm really bad at using a paintbrush or anything like that. But when it comes to video design, I don't have to have that fine motor skill to do that. I just have to have the vision, and the computer kind of puts it out there for me. And I think that contrast is why you see people that may not be naturally so good at art really, doing really well in the videography business or something like that. And the fact that you're able to kind of tap into both is actually quite impressive, because that's it's a whole new skill in and of itself.
It is, and I do see other artists I know that are like that I would even consider are more successful in their studio practice, or have they've got a great deal of hands-on knowledge, right? But that computer barrier is kind of a big deal. Like for me, when I say I'm not great with computers, what I mean is I can't make an Excel spreadsheet. That's pretty much what I mean. It's like I can everything else. If you want me to make art that looks like the art that I make by hand on a computer, that I know how to do. Yeah. But the biggest thing about going from the physical thing to the digital is just the knowledge in your mind that you're not actually creating anything concrete. You're creating experiences, which is great. But as I say, the computers and now the phones and the devices, you're taking all of these experiences, all the experiences you can have, right? Audio, visual, addictive, like physical, we're taking all these experiences and we're putting them into the same thing. So we're now creating, there's this feedback loop. I am creating an experience in this computer for a person to see on an actually an even smaller computer. Except I'm really trying to fake as much real world stimuli as I possibly can, so like the haptic feedback of the bumping and the beeping and the things that animate when you swipe, like all of that stuff is designed to make you feel like you're doing something. So that was probably the hardest barrier to get over, and I really never got past it, and I say that as a person who loves TV or animation. I enjoy media, but being on the other side of the mirror was hard for me. Yeah.
So you still tend to gravitate towards that physical, tangible art more so than not?
Yes and no. So because of the digital, I now have an iPad that I do a lot of, like most of my creative development. So all the sketching phase, color comps, all that stuff. What's fascinating for me is I'm currently recovering from this mistake 2 days ago. I get into the computer and say, I'm going to sketch something out, and I'll put a design down. And instead of going, okay, and then doing 10 more like that, because you have to, if you go, here's my idea, like in art, in any piece of art, you may have a vision or like the seed of an idea, but you have to grow it into something. I mean, it's a cheap metaphor, but it's a reality. It's where you go, I think I want to do a thing that's 4 words stacked on top of each other because it's a square and I have this square painting I want to do. And then you go, okay, cool. And if all you do is sketch out one example of 4 words stacked on top of each other, instead of how many different possible ways you can do that. In other words, you've made a note, right? Instead of saying, oh, it would be really cool if we edited the video, and interspersed B-roll with it. And that was the only note you made. You didn't go, here's the B-roll we want to use. Here's how much time we want to spend with what we're talking about.
Like specifics versus something just a broad stroke.
Yeah, where you really explore it instead of getting down there and your only note was to sit down in the chair. With, you know what I mean? So I think so the digital for me is a problem because there's no penalty for failure. You can go back over and over and over and over. Yeah. So if I'm in a sketching phase where I'm in rough development, I might find myself an hour or two down the road of what is ultimately a rough design, and it still looks like a rough design. But I've had that luxury of vacillating back and forth on the idea the whole time. So all the murals are physical. Like there's no getting past hands-on effort when you're doing the murals, which is what I like. But I have to use the digital because it's more seamless, but it also sometimes it can let me get into the mud a little bit,
So the devices have actually assisted in your creative process. So like they've stepped in and become a part of your creative process now.
Very much so.
Yeah.
I mean, even before that, the thing that would have been available to me at the beginning of my career would have been like a scanner. I had Photoshop and stuff, but this idea that you draw right here in the sketchbook, take a picture of it, airdrop it to your iPad, open it up, superimpose it on a picture of a wall that I just took with that iPad, and now I'm drawing the mural. Like that didn't exist. But what did exist was gigantic photocopy machines. So you could have this photocopy machine, and there are things you could learn to do with it, moving it around or whatever. So the tool always, if you're using a tool, if you're a creative person and you're using a tool, like, you know, they say like if you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. It's like I feel like if you're trying to do a painting, everything looks like not really a paintbrush, but you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
When you go, everything you go is like, what can I do to like surprise myself ultimately? You know, because as a commercial, my career mostly has been commercial art, meaning you go, you know, hey, I want a mural that looks like the style you do. And I go, all right, great. What do you want? And they go, well, like I want it to be blah, blah, blah. And they list everything that they want it to be and, and show you samples of what they want it to be. It's like, you really have to constantly mind read and readapt to different people's tastes all the time. And the digital, I don't think you could even do that without the digital.
Yeah, right.
I couldn't.
So it's like, you said you started 20 plus years ago doing this. How does your art turn into a business where you're supporting yourself? So our guest, Ryan, our last guest, he does art kind of on the side. His main income source is the real estate, and he does some other things as well, which is awesome. How do you turn that creativity into like an actual income source? Because that for most people, I feel like is the point where it becomes real and really hard to do.
Sure. Well, I will say Ryan is one of many people I would describe as a true entrepreneur in terms of like there are people who everybody makes something, you know. I make art. Some people make all the big decisions, and other people make money. They literally find ways to generate money. That's almost a creative process that other people go through.
Yeah.
If you're blessed to have those two things, you're completely unstoppable. You know, because if you're an entrepreneur and you have this thing to sell, and you also have a thing to sell that's unique because it's yours, you can really push that forward. I do not have both, so I kind of just want to preface that there. Like, I've enjoyed and had the benefit of working with entrepreneurs and particularly small business owners that I've worked for, you know, only a degree or two away from the leadership in the company, and that has benefited me greatly because of how much I've been able to learn and how much I've been able to experiment, while someone else was really saying, you know, I will sell that, I will pitch that, I'll explain it when it goes sideways. The only way I was ever able to leave the world of being an employee was just because, like I said, we started doing this thing 22 years ago, and didn't just say, oh, that was fun. It was like, we want this to be like incredible, you know?
Yeah.
And I mean, and that's, you never can do that, right? It's like, even today I go to paint a wall, I step back, and it somehow is not what I was hoping it was going to be. It just, I've kind of learned to live with that. I won't say I've learned to live with that. It's just a thing that's a part of life now, where you go like, yeah, that dopamine hit, nothing hits as hard. I mean, if I do like a 10-story thing, that's a different story, but you know, but you have that creative challenge of going, we want this to be great. We want it to be excellent. And doing that over and over while still having a job. So like, if we had gotten bored or gave up on graffiti, or it wasn't fun anymore, could have walked away from it, and I would have still had a job where I at least felt creative. You know, it wasn't like I was sitting down drawing cartoons for Pixar, but sometimes it was, right? It's like, there might be a couple of days where I get to do that kind of work. There might be a couple of days where I'm doing a voiceover. There might be a couple of days where I'm just in a brainstorming session. We're coming up with names for products or things like that. So, excuse me. That for me, that was really fun to have, and a safety net to have. I don't know that I would have been able to really get away from that if not for the fact that the last job that I had was in a company that I've always been grateful to, and I still work for today, called The Basement.
Okay.
And I was one of their early employees, and I was there for like a lot of the growth of their business. And there just came a moment where I either needed to choose to go in this direction, you know, I couldn't stay in the studio role anymore. The nature of the business had changed. The scope of the work had really changed. And there were opportunities there for me as long as I wanted them. But I was faced with a choice as to whether or not I could do that and really be as good at it as the person they needed to be. Couldn't be as good at that as I was at what I was already doing. I knew that.
Yeah.
And then I also had this mural business happening on the side. It was relatively small, but I felt, you know what? if it had to work, I think it could work. And I think this is probably the moment where it has to work.
Yeah.
You know,
The leap of faith.
And it wasn't that desperate. It wasn't like most people where they're left with no choice. It was like I could have made this other choice, and it would have been a great opportunity, just like the other opportunities that had been offered to me there.
Yeah.
But yeah, the timing. So the only thing when I think about building and growing from being a freelance artist to being a self-employed artist, and hopefully eventually one day an entrepreneur, of your own brand. The only advice that I give to young artists is, young artists will always ask these questions: How do you get to make money? How do you get people to let you create your ideas, and pay you what you want?
Yeah.
And my only advice to that is, first of all, that never happens. It hasn't happened to me quite yet. I'm not saying there aren't moments where it's like all creative freedom, and there's nobody in my life standing over me saying that's right or that's wrong.
Right.
But it's not a situation where whatever I do is okay. Like there's always a problem that has to be solved. And frankly, at this point, that's really how I work best is to know what problem to solve. But what you can do, and what I think a lot of young artists don't ask me is, how did you get to the point where your work was speaking for itself? Because it's very hard to explain the value of your work when it is not clear, And as an artist, there is no real market value for your work a lot of times. The market is what the market is, and you just have to get in there, and no one's going to tell you how much to charge. No one's really going to help you out that much, and especially here, there wasn't anybody whose footsteps we could really follow through. So I think the questions a young artist should be asking themselves are all technical. Now, if you're a business person and you're good at that, and you're a young artist, but you also have managed to make money without having to have a job, and you're good at that, I don't think anyone should ever give up that safety net of a thing you're good at for making money. Because first of all, we live in a society where the only thing you're definitely going to do is the thing that pays.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, if you're really good at something, even if you love art and you see other people, even like myself or like people that I really admire, their success, you think you want to have that. If that's not actually available to you, if you can't get there, if you don't have the time, whatever, but you're holding on to it and you're passing on something that really works well. I never had to make that choice. For me, the art was it was like there was no way I was going to become someone's account manager.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm the wrong guy. So I feel like that was an easy choice for me. But I think it's always about being the best that you can be at what you do. I mean, it's that, people always say you build it, they will come. And that became huge in the digital age and in brand awareness. But it's really true. I live in a place where there was no market for this stuff at all. There was no model for it. And there's no reason to think people would even want it. We just went out and did it for free for 10 years, 15 years.
Yeah.
And eventually people came knocking because the work was good.
Yeah. People start to focus on the wrong thing. They start to focus on, all right, let's build a sustainable lifestyle for myself instead of let's perfect this craft.
Yeah. I mean, you can't blame someone for that.
No, yeah. It's pushed all around us.
And the market's there. You can participate if you want. But if you're an artist, it's like a doctor, man. It's like if you don't really love doing this and you don't want to sacrifice to it, you shouldn't be there, because there are people that want it way more, and people that frankly are going to be more successful at this, and you're over here passing on something that might make you 6 figures a year.
Yeah.
And you can't turn that corner with the art, but you want to be that person who makes 6 figures in your art. It's like, I get that, man.
Yeah.
There just was no other choice for me. So I think it's really important for people. I always say, the thing that whatever you make money at, you're going to continue doing, because the people around you love you for you.
Yep.
If you go, oh man, I'm a passionate artist, it's my favorite thing. They go, man, he's such a passionate artist.
Yep.
2 years later, the passion maybe went away for the art. They're just like, well, I don't care. Just be you. Just just don't go away. Just continue being around. So.
Yep.
So, looking at your art, how has it changed in the past 20 years? And what would you consider to be your style? Or if someone looks at an art piece, how would they know that it's yours versus someone else's? And how does that look compared to other artists, I guess?
So you've actually just asked me the greatest question of my life. I mean, I'm being hyperbolic.
Sure.
That really is the question. Again, I go back to the technique. Like, I think as an artist, the way that I determine style, especially as so many more artists are painting and drawing and illustrating, especially as the aesthetic of just popular culture, everything becomes more melded. I think it generally comes down to technique. It's like, you look at a person, so when you look at my work, any of the, a mural or an illustration or whatever, I'll just keep it to murals because that's way more of my career up to this point, and certainly what anyone around here is going to know me for.
Sure.
But I think if you look at my murals, you're going to notice they're colorful, but smart. The imagery is bold, and the technique is clear. Like, does not mean everything is quite is meticulously perfect, but the things that need to be mostly are. And so that's kind of it's kind of hard for me to answer that question because, as I say, I've always prided myself on melding to different styles.
Gotcha.
Okay. So, and as an illustrator, like, so the portrait of Larry that's hanging up here on the Murphy Art Center, I can't point to anything else I've done publicly that's that sort of quasi-realistic style.
Okay.
And then the hands that are right across from it is a totally imaginary illustration, but it's based on the creation of Adam. So it's not so half of it is it's all my original drawing, but part of it, the seed of it, was not mine. And versus if you go down here to Kuma's Corner on the bar top, which I did a few months ago, that is like all stuff that's really fun that I like to do, but no one's ever hired me to do that before. And so, the only common thread I can really point to in my work is probably the technique and just the attention paid specifically to mark making. I hope I'm not getting too into the weeds here.
No, this is interesting. Because I personally, we don't really know anything about like the whole process, how it works. Like when you walk up and someone's like, "Hey, we want you to do a mural." Usually, I'm assuming they give you some sort of idea of what they want. So how do you go from zero to making something as awesome as you make? How does that process even go? Is it all through the mind? Do you just start with something rough and go with it, or how does that look?
Well, first you have to determine what it is a person's actually. If someone's coming to me, if it's a piece I've designed on my own, then that's a little different because, up to this point, I like robots. Like, so, so you'll see these sort of like destroyed looking chunky robots.
Cool.
And that's something that I really like to do. So you might recognize that. But as far as commercial work goes, if somebody's coming up to you and asking for a piece, like if someone sends an email, you send an email and say, hey, or a DM on Instagram, hey, I really like your work. I'd love you to do a mural for me. My first question is always, what did you see that you liked? Because if what you saw was the Wit down on Pennsylvania Avenue, which is like this really long abstract piece that's loosely based on, it's not loosely based on any real place, but it's loosely based on like a map or something like that. That is very different from the Larry, or the things we did out in Avon, which is like one of them's a realistic portrait of a frog, one of them is like a postmodern pattern made of fish, and one of them is like a cartoon tortoise, like a happy, excited little cartoon tortoise. So like, I'm always asking people, what did you see that you liked? Because again, this is my Achilles heel. I like that. Like, I enjoy the creative process. Like I really like mountains. I'm like, all right, I can lose myself as much in that as anything else. So once we identify what we're looking at, what's the target, what's the style, who's the audience really of the piece is kind of what you're always trying to figure out. There are two ways to start. The best way to start is in a sketchbook. The best thing to do is to sit down and talk with a client or with a person you're working with, or even if I'm by myself, I need another brain in the room. I almost don't even care whose it is. Like there are some people are better to give feedback than others, but the collaborative process of sussing out those ideas, that's what'll keep you from doing one note about what you want to do instead of really writing out notes about how all those things can be done. So ideally you start with multiple little drawings. I mean, I've got something in here. This sketchbook I don't use as much as I should, but I just want to give you an example. So these are little vote things that are based on voting, and they're just like, I mean, that's something that I don't think I'm going to end up using. But so here's a perfect example. These are all my little quick ideas. Maybe I do it this way. This is actually sideways. Maybe I do it this way. But this was like maybe 5-10 minutes of me and then going like, maybe like that.
Okay.
And then I said, boy, I really like that. And then I went all the way to this.
A little bit, yeah.
Instead of what you really, frankly, need is 2-3 pages of this.
Sure.
Yeah.
You know?
Sure.
So that's really how you start. And once you nail that, but that's the process. You go, I do that little thing. I think that's cool. And then you do a bigger one.
Yeah.
You
Gotcha.
know? And then
just more and more detail, layer upon layer. It seems like kind of just keep adding to it.
yes, you want to avoid getting too excited about the imagery too soon. You know, the content. I'm not big on messaging about like all art has to speak, but you have to be aware that it's saying something.
Yeah.
You know, so that's why you have to go through. I'm visual. I'm all visual. You go like, well, I'd really like to do something about peace. I'm like, the word peace. Like, I do a P here, and the E's a little between it, and then the bottom of it extends, and then the C's up on top of it, and then that becomes. We repeat that circle. It's like I just get excited about pictures.
Cool.
So, yeah.
What keeps the creative process fueled for you? So like, is there anything or any atmosphere? What drives you to keep that creative process going?
There is nothing else I'm good for.
Really?
I mean,
okay.
yeah. I mean, that's how I feel. You know, when I look at it and go, it's not like, oh, I'm so special. My art, my powers are so great. It's like, so far, this is where I found meaning. You know, and sharing it with others is a bonus. I'm hugely motivated by the ability to take an idea and run it through the filter, you know. But as far as what keeps me inspired to just create, I mean, it really, I feel like I have to.
Yeah.
I mean,
it sounds like you have like such a deeply rooted passion for the work you're doing already.
Well, my identity and my sort of sense of self are all really wrapped up in it. You know, I mean, it's kind of hard to talk about it without, because, you know, like I say, I'm a commercial artist. Like, so that's not like I'm in my studio hunched over producing stacks of paintings and I'm just like, it's trash.
Yeah.
But I'm producing a few paintings and I can't, you know, so I have that sort of that bittersweet relationship of like, if I thought I had already did what I could do, like I don't know that I would keep going, but I feel like there's just more for me to do.
Yeah.
And that's where also having music is helpful to me, because music is really at this point in my life still. I mean, I do play professionally. Obviously, nobody's playing that much right now.
Sure.
But I did get to play a couple of gigs over the summer, which were really great, and that's a massive release for me, because I always say that's no pressure, all pleasure. Like, I love what I do for a living, but it's also what I do for life. And now that I don't think that's right. You know what I'm saying? I'm not saying everybody should be that invested. I'm just saying I think that disproportionate investment of me and how I feel and me and the quest for meaning is so invested in the work that it's really it doesn't even make sense to think about it not happening.
Gotcha.
The only question is, what are you doing? It's like, that's why I say you got to show up. Like, I can't say that I wake up with ideas every day. Some days I do. Today I did, and yesterday I did. But you still have to go to the place and just see. It's like, you know, dude, I'll be honest with you. Sometimes the creative process means you're just pushing a broom for an hour. You just, I'm going to sweep this floor. Like, that painting is staring at me. The email is open over here. And I just, before I do those things, I need to sweep the floor. Yeah. And it's just, it's always trying to find, it's like the balance of it, because it is very freewheeling. You just have to put the hours in. I mean, it's, I don't think there's any shortcut for art at all.
Yeah. I think some people, I mean, I obviously fall into this too, but I think a lot of people fall into the mistake of, they see art as this like free go do what you want whenever you want, kind of how you do, but there is a level of discipline to it, like you said.
Well, and if you don't have it, it's so frustrating. I mean, it's very hard to stay motivated. At least for me, like I really thrive on the input of other people. I thrive on having things to look forward to. This thing of I'm going to make a painting and then try to get someone to buy it is like crazy to me. It's still really challenging, and it's still kind of amazing to me that people support themselves completely doing that.
Yeah.
Because I've gotten to the point where for a long time, again, until this year, the inquiries kind of came in. Sometimes it was really good, sometimes it was not very good at all. But I haven't had to put my flag in the ground and say, like, this is from here. This is what will go out.
Yeah.
And so that's where I am. That's where I am right now. Like, frankly, I'm trying to figure that out because the murals, it's not that I don't want to paint murals anymore or eventually get to the point where I'm not doing any, but I do want to get to the point where instead of doing 20, 30, 40, 50, and more or less everyone, I'm trying to do all of them that come along, getting to a point where we say we're doing 10, and we're not just doing any 10. We're doing it. We're going to set the threshold of here's where we want them to be, and here's the budget we think they should be, and here's how much time we want to spend on each of them. And when we're not doing those, here's how many. It's like but what is that?
Yeah.
So you're asking about the creative process, which is really important because that is the creative process, right? It's like having a painting is not being an artist.
Yeah.
Like getting in there and just making stuff, that is the creative process. But I'm currently figuring out now, and to answer the question you asked before, what is the thing that I have? What is the knowing that I do portraiture and I do these illustrations and large abstract murals and tiny little robot paintings, like what is that thing? And that to me has turned out to be the hardest project I've ever had.
Yeah. So so you had mentioned music as being something that is more recently started, and you said drums, correct?
Sure. Yep.
So you said you professionally play that? How does that start? Is that another, like a business that you started, or how does that look like?
No, definitely not a business. I mean, I started playing drums and percussion, I guess, really when I was 12.
Oh, okay.
But I did the summer camp thing in percussion before the 6th grade, and then I was in band from 6th grade through, I guess, the 9th grade. Then I moved from Lawrence over to Ben Davis, and they were like, well, our band program is very challenging, and I'm like, yeah, I know. They talked about it all the time when I was over there. And so I was like, you know what, you're right. Like, I'm out. So I didn't play music. I always had a drum set with me, but I didn't really start playing, even all through high school. I didn't really start playing until maybe a window, like a couple years, college and high school. Then I moved into an apartment, put the drums in a box, and I didn't play for 2 years. And so, like, now I'm in my, I guess, late 20s. So I'm like, at like 27, I guess, that seems like, in my mind, that seemed way too late to decide, maybe I'll pick this up again. Like, it's kind of sad to be this old dude in my mind. And I ran into my drum teacher, John Whitman. He was my old drum teacher from junior high. He plays drums for an artist in town called Jenny DeVoe, they're very well established. But I ran into them playing at the Rathskeller, and he said, "What are you doing, man? Are you playing?" And I said, "No, I'm not playing." And it was just like, it was very hard. It was very hard. It did not feel good to admit to him that I wasn't playing, and it did not feel good to feel the energy, the way that. And so at that point, I was just like, maybe I should keep playing. Maybe I should try to do this again. And so then I started. From there, he actually recommended that I play for 4 years. He didn't recommend that I play for 4 years. He recommended that I play at a new church, which is Indy Metro Church.
Cool.
They meet in the Athenaeum, and I was there for the first 4 years, just as their every Sunday drummer, like learning the songs and like, different bass players, different song leaders, different PA, different number of mics from 1 week to the next. And so I feel like, so during that time, I also ended up, because of a friend of the family, completely unprompted, I end up playing in like this bluegrass, like folk band.
Really?
And like, I don't listen to that stuff now, but that's what I play professionally still, is like folk Americana, like hybrid roots music. So
Cool.
So that all came to me just from personal relationships. It was I never said I'm going to be a professional drummer. And in fact, I didn't think I really could at all. And it was really hard for me to kind of accept that because I had gone I had good teachers when I was young and they scared me. They didn't scare me from playing. They just scared me because I knew that if I didn't really want it more than I wanted it, then I probably wasn't ever going to do it, So the fact that I decided later in life that I wanted to, and it's grown, it's become more positive and more fruitful. It's been really cool,
That's awesome.
But I do think like there's a big sacrifice there. There's no way I would have gone into music if I hadn't left my day job. I wouldn't have, because I wouldn't have had the freedom to go now start hanging out at the Chatterbox on a Monday night with Rob Dixon and Sleepy Floyd, or on Tuesday night at the Mousetrap, which is a place that they would play as well, and still will hopefully in the future. But I wouldn't have gotten into the habit of meeting the people in the jazz community and being able to, and also in jam band and just like going to the places where you can go to play music, and making that sacrifice of my time because now it was easier for me to stay out until 3 on a weeknight. And so it was all, again, that was almost a thing of desperation. Like, well, my excuse was I can't do this because I have a day job and I don't want to be a loser. Like you can only go in on 3 hours sleep to like an actual desk job. So for so long. That at least that was the case for me. So that's when I say it's a release from the art. It's because I never had to play music. It's always been a choice, Cool.
So you've lived in Indy for how long? Forever. Awesome. And what part of Indy are you from?
Actually I'm from Lawrence. So if you go east on 70 if you go up 465 and get off, that's right around there, like Pendleton Pike. So that's right, really where Lawrence basically starts. And I was just on the outside there.
Cool. So what role has Indy played in all of this? So as an art guy, when someone says artist, the first thing that comes to my mind is the coasts, specifically like getting out to California, really putting yourself in there. Why have you decided to stick in Indy, even though this was your passion and what you really wanted to do? Was there more, opportunities here? Because it seems like California or somewhere like that would be the place to go. So why Indianapolis?
It's a good question. The choice for me was because I had a team. I have the Fab Crew is a duo. So and we had this. It's kind of hard to explain, but I didn't think it was really. It was equally impossible for me to imagine making a living the way that I do now, as it was for me to imagine moving to LA and being as good as the people I would want to be competing against. Like to me, they were both impossible. And so the choice to stay here really was a matter of, we had the team here, both of us collectively had to go somewhere if we wanted to keep it going. And both of us collectively didn't want to. And so again, I vibe off of the collaborative. So, because that's why I kept a day job, a desk job for 15 years, because I really didn't think it was possible. Like I am your classic case of an artist that like, I'm not saying I'm not aware of the quality of work that I produce, but it's very hard for me to imagine myself really getting to a certain level. So it was easier for me to imagine building it from the ground up here. That said, I never thought of graffiti and murals as an industry. That is even if I were gonna really move to LA, I wouldn't have even really thought about it until the last 5 years, because it wasn't until then that I started going to Miami and started to just kind of like just become more aware, which is something I've done on my own. I've been, there are events and there's a street art culture everywhere in every major city, and just going around and seeing how that works. And like, it is strange, because you think, well, if I went to, you go to Miami in December and you think, well, if I live down here, man, like the career would be made.
Yeah.
You go to Miami in January, and all there's no boom lifts in the street. There's no there's that industry became very obvious to me when I went to Miami twice in the same year, because other my people that I've worked with here or in the Midwest who haven't gone down there, it's like you really don't understand. In your city, you're the best. You're as good as it gets. Not always, but that's true about a lot of my friends at this point. And you're struggling. You're like nobody cares, kind of. You really have to be your biggest fan, because no one's ever gonna like give you the respect, pay, whatever that you deserve.
Yeah.
And you go to Miami and you just see people they're flying in from all over the world, and they're getting out of an Uber, and I'm the first person they ever see like painting on the street, and you realize like what a spectacle it is. You see, and living here, it is absolutely impossible to understand that the value there is in being good at this art form. I say all that to say this: branding is everything. So street art is amazing because it has taken every art form that's ever existed and collapsed it into one genre. Now it's, you did that outside, that's street art, and which is fine. But that very much means that your technique, your proficiency at the style of graffiti, or your ability to transfer your fine art knowledge as a painter onto the large scale, they do not trade as highly as the market grows, because brand is everything. So that means a person who outworks you, a person who's luckier than you, a lot of art that's not, that you can't even compare to what you would call like a painting. They have vastly more success in that world than in some other fields where your art really does have to be good, because the fame factor is not there. So when I think about moving to other cities and thinking, if I went to LA, I could really do it, I'm like, yeah, I could, but I also have friends in Chicago that are on a level, and they're not the only game in town. So I don't want to be the only game in town. And I think if we look around, as far as murals especially goes, that's not really the case like it once was.
Yeah.
And it never was, by the way. I don't want to ever make it sound like nobody ever painted murals. Like there's always been a couple people here that deserve respect in that realm, and you can see the work of a lot of people like Carl Leck and Pamela Bliss around now. And I know I'm forgetting people, man. I hope nobody. I don't want to get emails about this, but Fab Crew and I did not invent the idea of doing a mural in Indianapolis.
Right.
But we were the first ones who came from graffiti and took the paint cans and the youthful sensibility and decided we wanted to get up on scaffolding. So cool. I guess that's not, to answer your question, I guess specifically, I don't think that moving to one of those cities would automatically give me more opportunity, because those cities all have a guy like me already.
Yep.
There are 10 people, 10 men or women like me who are from that city that they want to put on more, because at this point their cities are now host to these world famous artists. So there's a real weird conversation going on right now between people that are local and people that are not from a place. And that never mattered before. So there's something that's nice about staying in a city like this, where every movement in the arts is like a tectonic shift, at least conceptually. It may not always have the ripple effect of really, really breaking things open, but when an artist here makes a statement, it just stands out. And I don't think you can't go to LA and paint one mural and people suddenly really care, And I think here you could. I think one mural here could change your career if you're serious about this city,
All right, well, that is all we have for today's episode. We want to thank you all for listening, for watching, for joining us on this awesome journey of interviewing and getting to know Dan a little bit more. It's been a lot of fun for us. We want to thank you, Dan, for joining us on the show.
Thank you so much.
For those of us that are listening or watching and want to get a hold of you and want to maybe utilize your services, your business, how do we get a hold of you? How do we come to know you?
Well, there's still a lot of work from Fab Crew, and the murals we've done in town and some other places too, at fabcrew.com, and you can email us there. you can also find me directly, mostly on Instagram.
Okay.
Invisible Hometown. Invisible Hometown. There's an underscore in there, but if you search for it, I promise it's the only one.
Awesome.
That's kind of where I accept inquiries and questions from DMs, and
Perfect.
And yeah, that's it. That's where you're gonna find most of my exploits.
Awesome.
Cool.
Awesome.
Cool.
Well, thank you guys so much. Thank you again, Dan. Make sure you guys tune in next week for another episode of the Hustle Indy Show.